Have you ever sat alone in a quiet room and whispered to God, asking why everyone seems to be leaving while you are still standing there with open hands? Have you ever watched people slowly drift away, even though you tried to stay kind, patient, and loving? Loneliness can feel like punishment. It can feel like rejection written into the walls of your life. Many times we believe God is taking people away from us. But sometimes He is not taking anything away at all. Sometimes He is making space. Space for something deeper. Space for a stronger heart. Space for a purpose we cannot yet see. This story is about loneliness and faith, and about how God gently prepares a soul by quieting the world around it. It is about the kind of silence that hurts at first, but later begins to heal. And maybe, somewhere in these moments, you will recognize your own silent season in a quiet countryside village, where narrow dirt roads curved between small houses and wide fields moved like soft waves in the wind. There lived an old woman named Martha. She walked slowly and spoke gently, but her heart carried a deep and steady warmth. Her home was small, built of simple wood with a humble roof, yet everyone who entered felt a strange peace settle over them. Martha believed that God lived wherever kindness lived, and she tried, every day, to make her home a place where kindness never ran out. There was a time when her life was full of sound and movement. Her husband was strong and cheerful, a man who laughed easily and worked hard with grateful hands. Their son Daniel was curious and full of energy, always asking questions about the world and about God. Together, they worked the land, shared meals at a small table, prayed before sleep, and dreamed simple dreams that felt rich enough. Martha often thanked God, not for wealth or comfort, but for having just enough love to feel complete. Then one winter, sickness came quietly, like a shadow that does not announce itself. Her husband grew weaker with each passing day. Martha stayed beside him through long nights, holding his hand, feeding him slowly, whispering prayers she had learned as a child. Sometimes she begged God to heal him. Other times, she only asked God to stay close. When her husband passed away one early morning, the house suddenly felt too large and too silent. The walls no longer echoed with laughter. The air itself felt heavy. Martha cried alone, her face pressed into her hands, asking God why love had to hurt so deeply. And yet, in that grief, something unexpected happened. Alongside the pain, she felt a quiet reminder in her heart that God had not left with her husband. The silence was painful, but it was not empty. After his death, her body grew slower. Her hands shook when she worked. Her back bent under years of labor. Still, she continued her days with prayer. She believed that God does not give strength for a lifetime, only for the day in front of us. And each morning, even with an aching heart, she chose to rise again. She did not know it yet, but this was only the beginning of her longest season of quiet. When Daniel grew older, he left the village to find work in the city. He promised his mother that he would return often. That distance would not weaken their bond. At first he kept his word. He came home carrying loud stories, small gifts, and laughter that filled the empty corners of the house. For a while, Martha felt her home breathe again. But time has a way of changing promises. His visits slowly became shorter. Then they became rare. And one day, months passed without the sound of his footsteps at her door. Martha learned to eat her evening meals alone. She learned the different voices of the wind outside her window and the way shadows moved across her walls at night. Some evenings, Loneliness pressed heavily on her chest, and she whispered into the darkness, asking God if this was all that remained for her. But every morning, before the sun lifted its face over the fields, she washed her face with cold water, lit a small lamp, folded her hands, and thanked God for another day of breath. She never asked God to take her loneliness away. She only asked to still be useful. She cooked simple food, cleaned her small home, and worked in her garden where her hands touched the soil and her heart felt closest to God. Children, passing by, often stopped at her gate. She welcomed them with bread, fruit, and gentle stories. She listened to their small worries as if they were heavy burdens, believing that God listens the same way to every heart, no matter how small. Some villagers wondered why she gave so much when she lived alone. Martha would smile and say that loneliness is not empty when God is present. Even animals seemed drawn to her door. Birds rested on her roof. A thin old dog waited outside her home each day. Martha would gently touch its head and whisper that God sends those who need love. One summer, Daniel returned from the city, looking tired and restless. He watched his mother move slowly through her days, still cooking, still serving others, still giving what little strength she had. Confused and uneasy, he finally spoke. He asked her why she worked so hard when people would forget her, why she did not rest while she still could. Martha looked at him with soft eyes and told him that God had not forgotten her, and that as long as she could give love, she was not alone. Daniel did not understand. To him, loneliness meant failure. He believed a full life was measured by noise, by crowded rooms, by the number of people who called your name. Quiet service felt small to him, almost invisible. That same evening, a poor traveler came, asking for food. Martha welcomed him without hesitation, placing a warm bowl in his trembling hands. Before leaving, the man blessed her and said that God would return her kindness when her strength was gone. Daniel heard the words, but they did not settle in his heart. As the months passed, Martha's health weakened. Her steps grew shorter. Her nights grew longer. Loneliness still visited her, sometimes with heavy tears that fell freely onto her pillow. But instead of growing bitter, her prayers grew deeper. She trusted that God was shaping her heart in ways she could not yet understand. And in the quiet of those long nights, while the world slept, something unseen was slowly being prepared. One winter, Martha became very ill. Her body, already fragile, could no longer carry her from room to room. She could not stand. She could not cook. She could barely lift her hands. The small house that had always smelled of warm bread and soil from the garden fell into deep silence again. Word spread quietly through the village, carried by worried voices and slow footsteps. Then something unexpected happened. People came from every direction. Women arrived with bowls of soup and small bottles of medicine. Children sat beside her bed, gently moving fans through the air, telling her about their days at school. Men stood outside her door, removing their hats, praying in low voices as if they were afraid to disturb the fragile peace in the room. The house that once held only one quiet woman was suddenly filled with life. Lying there, weak and thin, Martha felt tears slide down the sides of her face, not from pain, but from understanding. None of her kindness had disappeared. None of her lonely days had been wasted. God had kept every small act of love, storing them like seeds, waiting for the right season. Daniel rushed back when he heard the news. When he entered the house and saw so many people caring for his mother, something inside him finally broke open. He sat beside her bed, held her fragile hand, and cried like a child again. He told her that she was never alone, that she had never been forgotten. Martha smiled weakly and whispered that God never takes love away. He only moves it. She recovered slowly, like a candle that flickers but refuses to go out. Afraid of losing her, Daniel begged her to come live with him in the city. Martha prayed quietly, and in her heart she felt peace. She believed God was opening another door. City life was loud and crowded. Cars passed like rushing water. Voices filled the air day and night. Sometimes, inside the small apartment, Martha felt that old loneliness return, sitting beside her like a shadow. But one day, Daniel took her to a home for orphaned children. He told her she could help there if she wished. Martha felt her eyes fill with tears before she could speak. She knew, without doubt, that God had answered her loneliness once again. She cooked simple meals. She told gentle stories. She prayed softly at bedtime. She held children when they cried in the dark. They began to call her Grandma Martha, and her heart, though tired, felt full in a new way. Years passed. Her body grew weaker, but her spirit remained strong and quiet like a steady flame. When she passed away peacefully, children, neighbors, workers, and strangers came to honor her life. Daniel stood among them, finally understanding that his mother's lonely seasons were never empty. They were guided, and this is the lesson her life leaves behind. When God allows loneliness, He is not punishing you. He is preparing you. He removes noise so you can hear love more clearly. He removes people so your heart can grow wider. If you feel lonely today, remember this. God may be shaping you into light for someone you have not yet met. Love given through God never disappears. It only finds new places to live.